Welcome to the Financial Finesse podcast, where we'll be discussing tips on how to handle your money and life with skill and style. Your host, Cathy Curtis, CFP, has been helping make finance accessible and intriguing for women for almost 20 years. You'll get savvy, actionable ideas listening to her conversations with some of the coolest and smartest women on the planet. And now, here's your host, Cathy Curtis.
Welcome back to the Financial Finesse podcast. I'm your host, Cathy Curtis, and today I'm thrilled to have Meg Connell as our special guest. Meg is the founder of The Organized One, a professional estate organizer based in Oakland, California, focused on helping individuals, including many single women and widows, navigate the challenging process of estate distribution. Transitioning from a background in interior design to a role deeply immersed in organizational tasks, Meg realized the need for compassionate and equitable estate distribution services after contemplating her own family's future dynamics. And Meg's journey is indeed a fascinating one. She's a specialist who understands the complexities of dealing with possessions, fair distribution, and the importance of respecting the wishes of the deceased. Her work, often at the intersection of grief and legality, involves collaboration with attorneys, trust officers, and financial planners, all while managing the emotional tenure of her clientele. In this episode, we peel back the layers of estate organization, a topic that could seem daunting at first, but is crucial for ensuring peace of mind and fairness. We delve into how Meg assists clients in making tough decisions and the strategies she employs when the divisions of items isn't crystal clear. We also explore the human side of her business as she shares her approach to handling situations where emotions run high and the importance of being sensitive to the grief process. Additionally, Meg and I discuss various hypothetical situations like what happens when a client doesn't have an estate plan and practical advice for those looking to consolidate and manage their assets. Meg's extensive experience and the comprehensive nature of her services provide a guidepost for anyone facing the prospect of estate organization, whether for themselves or a loved one. This episode is packed with advice, empathy, and a clear-eyed look at dealing with life's inevitables, and I am certain you'll take away some invaluable insights into the world of estate organization. With that, I hope you enjoy this episode of Financial Finesse with special guest Meg Connell. Hi, Meg. Thanks for joining me on Financial Finesse.
Hi, Cathy. Thanks for having me.
Meg, I'm always fascinated by entrepreneurs and the story behind why they started their business. Usually it's a passion or purpose of some kind or something that happened to them personally that drove them. I know that's the case for me. I'm wondering if you could share yours.
Sure. I went to school to be an interior designer, and during the last year of school, I was working at McKinsey & Company, which is a large consulting firm. And
what were you doing for them?
Just administrative work and event planning type things.
Okay.
Yeah. But I got this whole business kind of background with them and had, it was like a boot camp for business. When I graduated, I realized I didn't really want to go into the field of interior design because it wasn't paying what I was already making.
Yeah.
I stayed in corporate for about 8 years, and I realized that my parents were both going to die, and I come from a very large family. There's 8 of us from my parents, 7 surviving, and then there's 2 stepchildren from my dad's second marriage. So being the youngest, there's 6 girls and a boy, and I'm the youngest girl, and my brother's the youngest. I got the slim pickings of everything. My older sisters would push me around, and I got what was left. And I had a feeling that was going to happen when mom and dad died. And
interesting.
I thought, that's not going to be fair. So,
the cute baby of the family that everybody paid attention to and all that.
When I wasn't the baby, my brother, the only boy, was the baby. Yeah. when I left McKinsey, I started the Organized One, and I found NAPO, the National Association of Professional Organizers. It's called something different now. And I started organizing with live people, as I say, getting their homes organized using my interior design background and my organizational skills and my corporate skills to get people to pull their homes together. And there was a woman in our industry who her whole focus was getting your paperwork in order before you died.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing some work with her, and I realized nobody's dealing with this part of the business where the hashing out goes, the family falls apart area because they're fighting over stuff and what's fair, what's not fair. And I realized that there was a niche here that I could work at. And my whole thing was like, what is fair? There's what's legal and there's what's fair. Legal always trumps fair, but sometimes legal is vague, and you can create something that is fair within the legal construct. I don't know the word.
Yeah.
Contract.
Good word.
What's that?
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Struct.
Yeah. Thank you. Within the legal construct. And I started working more with estate planning attorneys, bank trust officers, and financial planners. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how that little niche works. And the business was born, and that was 26 years ago.
Interesting. In a way, what drove you, your personal situation at home, being the youngest one, and maybe getting left out a lot, it sashayed into this. And you started seeing it live, families fighting over, I don't know how many situations you have that are peaceful and congenial, probably not that many. It seems like when it comes to money and stuff and families, there's going to be some friction most of the time.
Right, there is. And I would say that I have been studying grief for a long time, so I know the stages of grief. And I could easily say that, yes, hardly any of my projects are harmonious. However, I'm really looking at it from a different perspective. And people are grieving, and this is one of the final things that kind of make it real. The person has passed, is that they're dividing their stuff. Despite what the documents say, despite all that, they're bringing a pretty large emotion to the table. A lot of times it gets directed at me because it can't get directed at the person who's passed. And they may have a relationship with their siblings where they really didn't fight. So they're not going to fight with them, but they are mad. They're mad at what the outcome is. And I know that. There's a lot of sad people and angry people, but I've only had a good handful of really acrimonious projects.
Yeah, that would be very stressful, I would think. Even if you can learn to remove yourself, I'd imagine that would be a very stressful situation.
It is a stressful situation because those people are usually litigious, and we're working with attorneys, and I'm always concerned about my own business. It's like when I'm working with most families, I'm just following the document and carrying that out. There's nothing I'm going to get in trouble for. They may not like me because I am following the document the way it says, and there are people, beneficiaries, heirs, that are not going to ask for it to be different. But one person thinks it should be different. So they're going to be mad at me because I'm not making an exception.
Let me give you a situation that and how you would handle it. So let's say someone they have their trust, and it's an organized estate, but this person has a lot of stuff and has beneficiaries for some things, but then says the rest of it, let the family decide. How do you deal with it when it isn't clear who gets what? Because like you said, you could talk to someone, but you're dealing with it after they die. And let's say a family member comes to you and says, this is our situation, we need help sorting this out. There's a lot of things that there weren't specific beneficiaries, a lot of stuff. There's 5 of us. We all want to get along. We want this to be fair. How should we organize that? And I know you're saying go back to the document, but the document says divide this evenly amongst my kids.
Right.
And I'm sure that happens because I know with my clients, they get really nervous about the idea of identifying who gets. People don't like doing that. Either they don't want to think about their death, or it's just too stressful to think, am I being fair to this person or that person? So have you had that situation where you've had to sit down with the family and go, okay, this whole room full of things, we need to decide who gets what?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
So what I do is I go back and read the document to make sure that I'm really clear about what they're saying, if there's anything that's pulled out specific. And if it says to divide equally among, sometimes the wording says to liquidate everything and divide the cash. And so that's one way to go about it. And if they say that, we let the beneficiaries buy things from the estate if they want to, because we don't want to give away or sell things that they wanted just because their parents said, share the cash. So there's all these different variables. So that's one. That's one. I take the temperature of the family. Like you said, you just gave me a good piece of information, which I was going to ask you. Do they get along? Are they in agreement? Is there anybody squawking in the background about, oh, I bet so-and-so is going to blah, blah, blah. I want to know what the temperament of the people are and the temperature of the situation. And that usually helps me decide on how to go forward. So there's many different ways to do this. Sometimes the family does it themselves and they just say, can you go there and just document what they're taking? And I say, yes. Now, if there's a clause in the trust or the will that says equally, anything that says equal distribution, there's two ways to handle that. One is you document everything that everyone's getting and you assign a value to it, which usually involves an appraiser.
Okay.
The other is people go through and pick and they all are in agreement. We don't care. This is good. This is fine. Because appraisers are really expensive. They're very valuable and every penny. But if the temperament of the family is, yeah, we don't need to spend a couple extra $1,000 to know that Susie's getting $2,000 worth more of stuff than Joe.
Yeah.
So there's all these steps going on.
And it's all variable. It sounds like it's case by case. It's really hard to generally answer this question, isn't it?
But I can answer it in a big, vague way. So equally, now if they're not in town, which happens a lot, there's people in Europe or in different states. What we do is we go in and we create a catalog of all the items. We give it a catalog number, a photograph and the dimensions, and we create an online catalog and we let people go through it that way to be able to pick out what they want.
That's smart.
We also will manage their list and any crossovers. So any crossovers, meaning more than one person wants something.
Okay.
There's different ways to handle that, depending again on the people involved.
Give an example.
Okay. I'm just thinking of a simple example that I can go from A to B and be clear about it. Okay. I had a family that had 250 pieces of fine jewelry, and three siblings, but two in California, one out of the country. And we created the catalog. We had it appraised because we knew this family was going to go penny by penny.
Okay.
They wanted equal distribution. All three siblings picked their wishes, and there were about 5 things that were crossed over with either one or both. Either 2 people wanted it, all 3 wanted it. So in this particular instance, I went back to the family, and this doesn't work with every family. With this family, it did. I went back to them and said, okay, here are the crossovers. Here are the crossovers. I want to take a little sidebar here and tell you that if there's any issues with the family members getting along, I have them pick anonymously. The other family members do not know what they're picking.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, people will go in and say, oh, she's picking that. I want that. They'll get everything to try and maneuver the situation there.
That totally makes sense to me. I'm from a family of 6 kids, so I get it. Yeah.
So I have them pick it anonymously to me only. And then when I go back, this is when we open up a can of worms sometimes. And I'll say, these 6 items you guys picked, and more than one person wants them. Please rank these in the order of importance to you. So
Oh,
I get 3 people and they give 1 through 6 on their items. And I looked through everybody's 1, and it just so happens their 1 was all different. So they each get their first pick.
okay.
Then I looked through everybody's 2, and 2 people wanted 1 item. 2 people marked it as 2. The third person gets their 2 because it wasn't. So there's 2 things now out of the running. And then I go through each one to see how many of their items, like the second person might get their first and their second item. And the other person might get their first, third, fourth, and fifth. So I make sure that they get their top items at first, if possible. If not, they're going to get their second and third items. And then the rest just plays out of what is left.
That is fascinating.
It's just, it works. It works.
And develop that system over time, being faced with situations like this.
Yes. Now, sometimes that doesn't work with families. Some people really want to stay in control of what is happening, and that takes it out of their control. And it adds on to their whole grief process of the one last thing they think they can control.
You have to be somewhat of a psychologist. And I mean, there's so many skill sets you need to have to do this work, besides being an organized person.
This is so true. So true.
Yeah.
And I've gone to therapy in my day, so I probably had enough therapy to know what's going on. And the big piece is that I have looked into grief a lot, and I understand the capacity of what people are going through. I know their heads are spinning. I know they're numb. I know it goes in waves. So I just try and work with that. I just get on the boat with them and just try and keep going until we're done.
Do you recommend it? Let's say the family is in deep grief and they're just not ready to do this work. Do you recommend delaying, or is there always a time factor involved?
It depends on the family.
Okay.
One of the things that would drive a time factor is emptying mom's house because it needs to be sold to pay estate bills or divide the money. So one thing really needs the money, 2 don't. That means they need to empty the house. That means they need to decide. So it depends I am working on one project right now where the house has been empty for 10 years.
Oh my God.
The heir just didn't want to deal with it. Now they're dealing with it. I have other projects going on where everything's been moved to storage, and we have unpacked it all in storage on shelving, and it's inventoried, and we're going back and forth with the litigators on who's getting what and things like that. It's different on everyone. We have to be really flexible. Flexible, but by the law. If anything, if it comes back, it's going to be fair. I'm really taking back about whether I like somebody or not, because sometimes people are mean to us. Whether I like them or not, if it's fair, that's what they're going to get.
That's why it's great that you're starting from legal documents in most cases. I wanted to ask, we'll get into what if there isn't that, but in most cases, you're dealing with a document that is pretty clear about what's supposed to happen. So you have that backing you up.
Sometimes there is no mention of the personal tangible property.
Oh.
So then it rests on the trustee, and I will coach the trustee or guide the trustee on what to do, what options they have, how to work with the family in where they're at. If the family's arguing, how we work with it that way, or if the family's really loving and just grieving, how we work with it. There's many different techniques to put forward, but my motion is always to move forward. They're hitting on the biggest asset. The biggest asset is usually the real estate. And to hold up the sale of the real estate so it doesn't get listed for sale during the advantageous months that you should be selling a house, and you lose a couple $100,000. Almost always there's not that much value in what is in the house.
Meg, I want to pose a couple of situations to you, real life stuff. And so you could walk through the steps of how you would work with someone like this. I think that would be really helpful to the listener.
Sure.
All right. So first one, I'm the executor of an estate. of a woman who died at 95 years old. She was single, no family left, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, stuffed to the gills with art, furniture, costume as jewelry, fine jewelry, ceramics, glass. She loved collecting. She traveled a lot. She had all this stuff. Fortunately, she had her estate planning done, will, trust, but she only identified specific beneficiaries on some of the stuff. The rest of it is to be sold and the cash given to charities. But she also said in there that you can have my friends come over and pick out what they want. There's some vague stuff. So here I am, the executor. I'm busy. I don't even know where to begin. I agreed to do this, and I'm like, why did I agree to do this? So I start asking around. I get referred to you. I'm like, oh my God, this person can help me. Oh, I can't believe I'm reading what they can do. So I call you. Let's walk through the steps of how you get engaged with that person. And okay, so we're talking on the phone, the initial phone call. What happens?
So I will ask you again, back to the legal document, like who are the entities, the nonprofits that are getting the stuff, the residual, the income from all the sales? Who are they? No matter who they are, but I just need to know who it is, because there may be some things that they are interested in taking as personal property versus just the cash. 99% of the time they want the cash. And they usually have a lot of lawyers. So they are going to come after, they're going to make sure that their entity is getting everything they could. Okay. So you, as the trustee, is responsible for appeasing them and also following your client's wishes. Now,
it's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you this though. This assumes that the charities know that they're major beneficiaries of this estate, right?
It doesn't matter, because once you give a payment to them, they're going to want to see the court accountings, and they're going to see where the monies and things went. So when it comes to friends coming through and getting items, if that's written in there, you as the trustee have the right to allow her friends to come through and pick items. Now, you would want to catalog everything and value everything, and you might want to put a cap on it. There might be a friend that comes in, or 4 friends that come in and they take one thing each. And then you got one friend coming in and they want about 40 things. You might have to say to that one friend, I know this was in her wishes. However, there are public entities that are getting the remainder of this estate, and that probably won't fly with them to have you take this many items. It's supposed to be a memento of your friendship. So maybe you can tone it down to 3 things, or 3 things that aren't like hugely, or a dollar amount.
So in this case, if the person wanted you to, would you take over that role? You would talk with the friends, set the ground rules, explain why it needs to.
The trustee would need, I would coach with the trustee about what the ground rules are.
Okay.
What they want to do, and different
so
scenarios.
An advisor. You would act as an advisor in this situation.
On that piece of creating the ground rules. Sure. Yeah. But then if the ground rules are decided and I know them, and the attorney has, or you have communicated that clearly to the friends, what the ground rules are. She wanted you to have something, a memento of her. You'll be meeting with our estate organizer. Please give her a call to schedule some time to walk through the house. And I will go through and they will pick out stuff, and I will not promise them anything. I will let them pick out stuff and then tell them, this is great. We're going to leave it here for now. I need to go back to the trustee and tell her what these are. And as soon as she releases them, then we'll schedule time for you to come pick them up.
Okay.
So I can go back and say, hey, this is all great. They're all picking 2 things. It's good. There's nothing huge value here. Let's mark it down, put it in your accounting, let them go, and then you move on.
Okay.
If you've got a problem, you've got to go back as the trustee and have a conversation with the friend. Yeah.
Okay. And in this particular case that I'm describing, there's a lot of art that is worth money. It's contemporary art that a lot of the pieces will sell for several $1,000s.
Okay.
And that cash is to go to charities. And this executor is, oh boy, where do I start with the art? So I'm sure it's an appraisal.
Yes. You would want to look at, again, are you talking about the art going to a friend as a memento or in general?
No, this is the art that hasn't been designated beneficiary, that is the residual of the estate that's to be sold to go to charities.
Okay. So what you would do, you would probably, as your role as trustee, engage with an attorney to help you navigate this trust. And you would go to the attorney and ask them, do I need to do an appraisal of all the personal tangible property? There's mixed feelings on this. And what ends up happening is during the court accounting, or if it's a probate, during probate, they want to know a number, like how much stuff was in the house? What is the value? Now, in an estate like that, the values could get up to 40, 50, 60, $100,000, maybe, depending on how many pieces of art she had, depending on how much jewelry she has. If that's the case, it may need, if there's anything that, if it wasn't listed, if it wasn't in the trust, it may have to go through probate if it's a certain number. So you can talk with your attorney about, do we need to get everything in here appraised? Because the value of items sold, and most of the time I send stuff to auction. When it goes to auction, whatever it sells for is the market value. You might get a different number from an appraiser of what the market value is on that. Auctions are subjective. They're like the stock market. Depends on what's happening that day. Depends if there's civil unrest. Depends if there's a storm happening. Are people going to the auction?
Yeah.
It's the numbers that the appraiser give you aren't always the numbers that you will actually get on a resale market.
Okay.
But if you don't have to get an appraisal, or if you need an appraisal, but everything's going to get sold through auction, you just wait for the auction number, and that is the appraisal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And saves money because
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. In this case, this person who's the executor says to you, can you help me find the best auction house? And you will help do all that. Will you help move the paintings to the auction and all those details of transport, everything?
So we have a whole collection of dealers that we work with and auction houses that we work with. And what our first thing would be is to, depending on whether it's getting an appraisal, if it's getting an appraisal, they're going to be there. They're going to, that document's going to be available to show the auction house. They will cherry pick pretty much what they want to auction off and leave the rest.
Okay.
Our first thing is telling them what's there, or having them there and working with them on what they want, what they don't want. And then, yes, we arrange for the freight and the shipping to happen, coordinating with the auction house and one of our staff on site. So that happens there. And then anything else that they don't want, we have other avenues of selling. So we try our dealers, and then we try consignment stores. Then we go to Craigslist, OfferUp, things like that. And then the rest is donated. If we cannot find a place, and donations are really strange since after the pandemic, they don't take as much as they used to take.
Oh, why is that?
I think everybody cleaned their houses out during the pandemic, and they got stuck with so much inventory of stuff that is still not moving that they don't have room.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right. And the secondhand market right now is a little slow. People are not buying as much as they were a year or two ago. So if we cannot, our whole focus,
during the pandemic, they don't need so much stuff.
Right. Our whole focus is a green-based business. We try and keep as much stuff out of the landfill as possible.
I was going to ask you about your green focus. I really like that. Talk more about that.
So if we've tried all of these avenues on an estate to first monetize any personal property in any of our avenues, and we can't get there, then we give it away for free. We will try to sell it first, give it to a nonprofit or anywhere with a 501(c)(3). And if that doesn't help, then we go to general public, free, anything to get somebody else to use it. And then the last resort is the dumps.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I remember when my mom's estate, she had an old piano that she cherished, right? But nobody wanted it. Literally nobody. And she was alive when we were emptying her house because she had to move to assisted living. And it wasn't only the piano, it was so much stuff. Her sewing machine, ancient. Nobody wanted that. And she kept saying, "Oh, who ended up with my piano? Who ended up with my..." And we didn't have the heart to tell her that it had to go to the dumps. It's People place a really high value on their possessions.
They do. They do. Right now, I'm dealing with an organ, my second organ this year. And I have a whole page of people we've contacted. I've had people come and look at it. The first one went to the dumps because we could not place it. And this one, it's not a done deal yet, but it also might go to the dumps. And it's heartbreaking for the owners.
Yeah,
Also
really,
for us, we don't want to send it there, but no, they're huge.
an organ. I guess you got to look at churches or
Churches
stuff.
all have their own organs. We
Yeah.
put it out there on Craigslist and on specific sites for organs, but mostly
Sites for organ.
there's Facebook groups for organ players and organ collectors.
Right. Okay, can I give another situation that
Sure.
you may come across? Okay, so I'm 82 years old, and my partner of 25 years just is my second. I was married, and then I had a partner. We never got married. He just died. And he has a huge collection of books, some of which are worth something and many aren't. And at the same time, now that I'm alone, I'm looking at all my stuff going, I don't want my kids to have to go through this. I want to start downsizing now and get more prepared for my time.
Mm-hmm.
She gets referred to you. Do you help people in that situation where it's not really an estate yet?
Yes, we do. I have a group of folks that work with what I call the live clients. So they will go in and work directly with them. The first thing I would ask is, did he have any children from a previous marriage or relationship? Because unless they are not in the picture whatsoever, that's where she first might want to go. If they were his books before she wasn't married, so they're technically his property.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would go there first to find out what the legal structure of ownership might be. And then we have book dealers. We have so many book dealers that will come in and just go through that library and buy books. Yeah, so they would do that. And then the rest would be donated. And then some of them end up being recycled because a lot of people keep textbooks, which are no longer up to date. Those get recycled. In working with a live client, the organizer would just talk to them about what they were thinking about. What are you ready to let go of? And what were you thinking? What is bothering you the most? And depends on what topic they choose on whether we have a place for it or we don't. Like you said, pianos, sewing machines actually are selling. Older sewing machines are selling, but they do have to be functional. They don't sell for much. But if you want to get it into someone's hands, there are all sorts of people sewing these days, tons of people sewing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a new kind of hobby, like upcycling clothes and stuff like that. So depending on what they want to get rid of, we open up our resources to that and tell them what's available, what's not. And a lot of times we're in the situation where there is nothing available. They don't want to hear that. So we will do the best we can with a generic, like a Craigslist ad to sell something, or any other way. She may know, maybe her niece might want it, or her neighbor said she wanted. Well, let's call them. Let's get that. We will go down every road possible.
And you really get detailed.
We do. It's what they want. And if they're ready to let it go without all that work, we will deal with it. But if I see it's getting in their way and it's really getting them discouraged about downsizing, we will ask them, do you want us to look into these? Should we call? Your friend said it. Should we call them? Sometimes they will say, no, let's just not deal with it right now. And it stays there.
Okay. And in this case, let's say we're talking about the possessions now.
Mhm.
I'm sure the question will come up from your firm. what is your estate plan? Do you have an estate plan? Would you ask that question?
Yes.
As far as documents, do you have a trust? Do you have a will?
Yes. That would come up when we would be talking about the ownership of items if somebody's passed. If they were married, I would say, is there a trust? Is there a specific designation of this person's stuff in the trust? If they weren't married, I would say, did he have a trust or a will? And are there specific designations in there? Let's look at that first.
Yeah.
And so that topic comes up.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's say this woman, forget about him for a while. She has not done any estate planning, and you find that out. Do you refer her to an attorney? What would be your reaction as someone that said, oh my gosh, I've been meaning to do my trust and will forever, and I just haven't got to it?
Let's say it's a her, I ask her before I refer anybody, I say, what do you want? Where do you want your stuff to go? What was your idea? And if they say, I don't care, they probably don't want to trust because they don't really want to spend the money. If they say, I should get this back to my family and I really want ARF to have a big donation in the library, the local library, then I'd say, okay, that's great. But if you know what happens if you don't put that down in writing, all of this, and especially if you don't have a will, there's a court appointed probate person and they will just sell your stuff. They won't do anything that you're wanting to do. This is what will happen to your stuff. If you really want it to go to this entity, you need to document it. So I do refer estate planning attorneys and I ask them a couple questions. Do you want a small firm? Do you want a big firm? If they have businesses and multiple properties, I say it's probably better for you to go to a big firm because they have real estate attorneys right down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have, what are the attorneys that sell businesses? Transactional attorneys. I'm not sure what they're called, but
Right.
they have all those specific types of attorneys in-house that they can get information from on your specific situation. But if it's just a woman and she owns property and has 4 or 5 investment accounts, I'll say, do you want to go see a woman or do you want a man? Do you want a small firm? I ask a bunch of questions because there are so many estate planning attorneys that I network with, and they all have a little bit different niche. So I have 3 or 4 names of what they think they'll be comfortable with to them.
You are a massive resource of information for people, I'll bet, in so many areas.
It is quite wide. It's hard to define what we do.
How do you keep track of all? Do you have a great CRM system? Like, how do you keep track of all your referral partners and experts?
I do have a CRM system. I won't say it's great. I am really needing to hire a salesperson because that is where it's tough for me to run the business, train the people, and do all the marketing and sales.
And everything. Yeah. Oh, this is a great segue because I want to ask you about your team. So I went on your website and I read all the bios of everybody that you have on your team. So fascinating. It's not your, the bios aren't your typical bios because it talks more about their passions, like the vintage collector or this person's love clothes and say we're blah, blah, blah. And it's an interesting crew of people that I'm sure have all these expertises. How did you gather them all together? And they probably are contractors with you, right? They're not employees.
That is correct. They're contractors.
Yeah.
And there's more people that are not up on the website yet either.
Okay.
So that's a good question. It took me a long time to figure out how to hire correctly. And we have criteria that we ask when we're hiring people. Have you worked for an auction house? Have you worked for an estate sale company? Or do you have knowledge in the secondhand retail market? And if they say no to all of those, they're probably not a good fit because as these people are going through somebody's property, they've got to be able to identify something they see. Like the clothing person will go through the clothing and they'll find a vintage Dior or other items of collectible quality. They will pull those aside and say, maybe these need to go to the real, or maybe we can send them to auction, depends on what it is. So they have to have some skills that they bring to the table so that I know, as representing my eyes on things, that they are looking at things for their value, and also historical family items. We really take pride in maintaining anything we can find of memorabilia for the family to show them, and they can say they don't want it or not. But it's important to us that we're not just throwing stuff out, or we don't take consideration to family photos. All that is extremely important to us.
Yeah.
So we put
the family photo thing. Oh my gosh, that must be hard. My mother had bags of photos. She used to put them in photo albums, but then she just put them in bags. And it was so hard because she was a teacher for a long time, and a lot of her photos were of field trips and things that had nothing to do with the family, intermingled in with family photos. So who's going to go through all those photos?
So we did that with my mom's photos, and a few of us sat down at a couple times. It didn't happen all at once. And we separated them out by people. Each person got their pile. And if there were two people in a photo, we put it aside. And if there was two of those photos, one got one and the other got the other. The ones that were travel photos that had nobody in them or people we didn't know, they just got recycled.
Okay. Yeah, but you got everybody together. That's smart. That's a really...
Yeah, we had shoe boxes, and I was like, that's Terry's box.
Yeah.
Rebecca's box.
Right.
Christopher's box.
Good. See, that's your skill, organizing, experience, all that, coming up with because a lot of it is creativity. How does this solve this particular problem?
Right. And when we get to clients, we suggest things like Scan Cafe. If they really want, it's very...
I don't know what that is.
It's very time consuming and expensive for us to go through photographs. But if you send all your photographs to Scan Cafe, and I think it's in India, but they have a processing plant in the United States somewhere. You send it to them, you send photo albums, you send bags of photos, you just send them as is. They will scan and digitize every photo that you give them, and then send those photos back.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's great.
So everybody can get a digital copy of the photos. We do have fights over the originals.
Oh, okay.
I try and talk people out of that. You can get this printed on excellent photo paper, and it'll last longer than that original.
Yeah.
It'll look the same.
Obviously, there are options now. Yeah. Something we talked about, talking about your team. I'm sure the big question that comes up all the time is the trust factor and who you are bringing into people's homes to look at how do you deal with that question? And what kind of checks do you do on the people that you employ to do the work?
We have an extensive interview process, and we do a security background check on all our people. And we also do long phone calls with their references and ask a lot of questions. And then they're not working alone for the first 3 or 4 months. So we can see you can tell if somebody's not presented themselves correctly by how they're working. Yeah. So I implicitly trust all the people that work for me. They wouldn't be working for me if I didn't, because it's my business. I'm not going to throw 26 years down the drain.
Oh, yeah.
Because somebody wants to pocket something. That's not how it, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure the interview process is in-depth and intense.
Yes. Yes.
It is. And so your team now is how many people?
Right now we are, let's see, I have people all over doing different stuff. So that means to say 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 people, but the 8 are not all in the field.
Okay.
We have about 4 in the field right now.
Okay. And so you're Bay Area based?
Correct.
What if you get a job that's in another state?
I have traveled for work, but we ask a per diem. It's not cheap. We're not cheap because we carry so much knowledge with us.
Yeah.
that you're paying for our knowledge and our labor. Somebody goes, why don't you bring somebody in to just do that part? You can't, I don't have enough of that little part to employ somebody full time for it and manage that. We do a per diem rate if it's 30 minutes outside of Oakland transportation, and people pay the per diem rate, and that includes lodging and meals.
Okay. And how much of your business is outside of the Bay Area or even Oakland? Is most of your business in Oakland?
No, it's San Francisco, Marin, Oakland, Walnut Creek, Lafayette, Livermore, Hayward, San Leandro.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's most cost effective for people locally to use your services. And
Right.
then, but if they really want you, you will travel, but you charge the per diem charges.
Right.
And from what I was reading on your website, you are hourly and you don't quote lump sums for a project because you have no idea really how long it's all going to take, right?
That is true. And it's really hard to explain that to people because what I usually say, the story I say is, here's a whole room of boxes. We have no idea what are in those boxes. One could be a box of tube socks. That's like a 3-minute of our time. The other is a box of paper. And oh, is that an original stock bond in there? Oh, I see some savings bonds. Is that a diamond ring at the bottom of the box? That's a 2-hour box.
Yeah.
To figure out what's in there, what's valuable, what to put aside. And we can't see it. And then there is the response of the client. If I'm dealing with specific heirs, I have no control over their response time, their cooperation. And the same thing with outside vendors. We hire haulers, shredding companies, movers. We have movers that we hire to move stuff to the donation place. We don't have any control over their schedules either.
Yeah. It would be impossible. I guess what people have to keep in mind is you're running a business, and if you're going to stay in business, you have to charge for your services properly, or you're not going to be in business anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you have a minimum project that you'll work with when you're interviewing somebody on the phone?
We do. We have a 3-hour minimum.
Okay.
For any appointment. And a lot of people want us to go out and look at a place, but we don't do that because it's stuff. And we'll see it when we get there. I don't need to go and look at the stuff and start a scope if they haven't committed to the job.
Yeah.
Because we will talk to them about what we're going to do, when we show up, and what they want us to do. Sometimes they're looking for specific items. So it's all stuff. And we're just going to deal with it when we get there.
And you know that from experience. You've been doing this long enough.
Yes.
You have a process that works for you, works for your business goals, but also works for the client.
Well, a lot of the clients actually don't like the fact that I won't come out and walk through.
Yeah, I bet.
Send me pictures. It's a lot. That's a lot of time to walk through projects. I will actually. Some people really want me to do it, and I charge them for it. I will give them information at the end of the meeting about if they want to do it themselves. That's totally fine. In fact, we have a package, depending on what they have and how much, of me going in there and writing down all the things I think they need to do to start getting this house empty, and I hand it over to them, and they can do it on their own. That's great. So work ourselves out of a job. We like finished projects. And if that means we can hand something to someone and they can do it themselves, that's great. Sometimes that process is part of their grief process and necessary.
How often do people think they're going to do it themselves and then call you a couple weeks later and go, there's no way I'm doing this myself?
Oh, probably about a third or a half.
Yeah.
Because the rest of them come through estate planning attorneys or fiduciaries who are the trustees, and they're not going to do it.
Yeah, right. No way. That must be, is most of your business from professionals or individuals? Professionals. Okay. And they're not going to do it.
No.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Bank trust officers are not going to go in there and sort through rusty hairpins.
No. So when they contact you, as long as they are good with your fee structure and your services, you're going to get hired because they need to have somebody. So the individuals that call you, that's probably you have to approach that a little differently, making sure they understand what you can and cannot do and all those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I do spend the minimum a half an hour on the phone with what we call an intake call or assessment call, asking a lot of questions and then telling them what I think, how it would go forward. Even with us telling them that, some people don't have the energy or the wherewithal to even do that. So they still need us to come and do it. But a lot of people, it's interesting because I have many repeat clients, a number of banks that I work with, a number of estate planning attorneys that continue to send work to me.
Yeah.
And they know to spend a half an hour to give me all the details I'm asking for, because that helps us when we get there to dive in and not call them 1,000 times. I found this. What's this? Like, we'll ask, are you looking for any paperwork? Are the taxes complete? Should we keep back taxes for how long? Are there any bonds that you're looking for? Have you found the keys to the car? Anything that so are there guns in the house, which is a new one we put on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And just, we ask a lot of questions. So we have that up front going in and we hit the ground running.
Okay. So describe as a business person now, just put your business head on, who is your ideal client?
My ideal client is a professional who is the trustee, because they don't have an emotional connection to the stuff. And they're thinking clearly, they're thinking with the client's best interest in mind, which is the bottom line. And, or if there are heirs involved, they're taking that into consideration, but there's a little bit of a buffer.
Yes.
It's a lot more work for us to work with individuals if they are immediate family members, because they're right in the middle of the grief and they have a hard time making decisions. They're just slugging along. A lot of times there's friends that are trustees, and those are okay because they know it's a job. They're doing the job.
There's distance there too. Yeah. So, what about what you call the live client? Is that a ideal client for you, or do you prefer what do you call the after? You don't call them the dead clients, do you?
I do. They are our live clients and my dead clients.
Okay.
So the live clients, yeah, I have 2 professional fiduciaries who work with me and another certified organizer who work with the live clients. And the type of client we like there are the ones that are ready and willing to do the work and just need the help. We have had people hire us on, and the appointments are very difficult. They won't do anything. They won't make any decisions. And we basically release them. We're like, we're not going to take your money to sit and argue with you. Wait, that's not what we do.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, please come back and we'll be happy to work with you. In saying that, we don't work for anyone who hasn't spoken with us directly. A wife cannot hire us for a husband, cannot hire us for a wife. A child cannot hire us for an adult.
Okay.
Unless the adult is talked to us, agreed with it. Now the child may pay, or the wife or the husband may pay our fee, but the contract is with the person whose stuff it is. Because I don't have the right to touch somebody's stuff without their permission.
Okay, so just and this probably comes up quite often, a child whose parent, let's say their mother, she's widowed, is starting to go senile.
Yeah.
You got a house full of stuff. They're looking in the future going, oh my gosh, I want to deal with this now. So they contact you and said, can you help me? You would not do it unless the mother stepped in and said, yes, I'm willing to go along with this.
That is one way that we would do it. The other way is I would have a conversation with the children and say, have you had her assessed for capacity? Does somebody have power of attorney over her decision-making? Because if that's the case, then we work for the power of attorney.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's either going to be her, the client, or somebody or her conservator.
Yeah. So you make sure they have their paperwork in order before you start. So speaking of, let's talk about widows a little bit. So my financial planning practice focuses on single women. And so I am always helping them make sure they get their estate plans together. What is your advice if you're thinking of just women out there or alone for whatever reason? what kind of advanced planning would make all of this easier for whoever their heirs are, and just organizing their stuff and feeling good about it?
Basically a current estate plan, and a document where, like my estate planning attorney, I have a document and there's a page in there that says all my accounts, all my beneficiaries. It has everything in there and it's current. A lot of the widows that we end up working for are ones that are recent widows who need to rename their
IRAs and
into the new name of the survivor's trust.
yeah.
So, and that's where they get stalled. Like maybe the partner was the one doing all the financials. So we will go in. We would go in and we will sit down with them with the paper and start sorting it out for them, creating a filing system, telling them things that they should talk to you about. Okay, maybe this one needs to be consolidated or something, or
so you know enough about this. You have expertise in this area, the paperwork area, to advise them.
We don't give legal advice.
Yeah, right.
Or financial advice, but we tell them to talk to you because we think that something needs to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you see they have a bunch of accounts at Schwab, let's say, you'll say if you don't have an advisor, you need to call Schwab, let them know and have them help you retitle these accounts, for example.
Or if they have accounts at 10 different banks, and it's not because they're at the insurable limit at all of them, say, let's look at consolidating this. Nobody needs to be dealing with 7 different banks.
And that's something for somebody to think about ahead of time. Let's get my finances in order where it's easier for someone to manage later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is in your side of the business, when you see a trust and there's a lot of general clauses like divide all this stuff between family members, do you think that it's better to have specific beneficiaries on most things? Like, do you advise people to go through their house?
It depends on the family.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes the parents know if the children are friendly with each other, or they know if they're competitive or they fight. They know that. And some parents they just don't want to deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it. They can deal with it when I die.
I know, but yeah.
If there are big items, they can always ask their children, is there something that you wanted that I should, and be clear and open with everyone. In my generation and the generation before me, you didn't talk about money. You didn't talk about any of that.
It's true.
And I really encourage people to talk with their children. But unfortunately, the generation that I'm still working with is a generation above me. And they are still in that mindset that it all has to be secret.
I know. My clients too, most of them say, I'm really not sure what my parents have. And I'm really not sure what their estate plan says. And I always encourage them to gently try and have a conversation, especially if the parents are starting to get older and are health problems or senility, and they still don't know. I really encourage them to have the conversation. But it's a tough one. Money is such a taboo thing still. But
Right.
You're in younger generation, that's changing a little bit.
Hard to say. I do have a younger generation who are heirs and beneficiaries that I've been dealing with. And if they end up with some type of a contentious distribution, I always say, this is a good lesson for you, for your children.
Yeah.
Get your stuff organized, be very clear so this doesn't happen to your kids.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
This has been so great. Is there any closing advice you would like to give to our listeners about this general topic? We just talked about how to maybe prepare a little bit more, but if you could share any resources you might have that would be helpful to the listeners, I'd be happy to put them in the show notes, and how to get in touch with you if you are looking for new clients, all those kind of things?
We're always looking for new clients because we always finish jobs.
Okay.
So
You're right. It's one and it's done, you move on to the next. It's not an ongoing process.
right.
Yeah.
So they can call our office and schedule an assessment call. And that's 510-482-5892. Or they can go to the website at www.theorganized1, and the one is spelled out ONE.com. And there's a contact form on there, and they can directly schedule an appointment with me, a half an hour phone call to discuss what their project is. And I'm always happy to give out information, always happy. I feel like there's no way I can give away the store. I have too much information.
Yeah, you really do. And so that complimentary call is very generous. I'm sure you could figure out whether someone needs your services or not, can afford your services or not, and then you could direct them if they want to do it themselves, where to go for help, all those different things. So
Exactly.
I encourage our listeners, take advantage of the resource. Sorry, Meg, you may be inundated with phone calls.
It's okay.
I could see you've been doing this a long time and you have a wealth of experience. And I'm sure your list of people that you work with is huge, because you touch on so many different areas.
I do.
It's really fascinating to me what you do. And I think it's a great service and well needed.
Thank you. I find it fascinating too. It's not really a job for me.
Yeah.
I've been blessed. I've been really blessed to be able to do something that's very important for me, and help other people at the same time.
I'm sure you get a lot of joy out of it.
Yeah. I think some advice I would give would be your estate plan current. Get an inventory of your financial assets so that you can get your estate plan current. And I'll give one random referral. If you have jewelry that you don't use and or don't like, you can always go into a gold or silver buyer and they can take the stones out, but you can cash in that jewelry and go get something else out of it, or take it into a jeweler and have them melt it and buy yourself something that you really like.
I love this idea.
It doesn't need to sit in your jewelry box for years.
Yeah, I have a question for you on this specific thing. How do you know you're getting a good deal for your gold necklace, for example, that you want to get melted down into a new piece of jewelry? You have to go to reputable people, of course.
The gold and silver prices are posted daily and they fluctuate. So that is the gold and silver prices. You are not, and that is for 100% gold. You'll have to put in what carat that you are wanting to, 14 karat, 18 karat, 20, 24 karat. And then you can get a price for the melt called the melt value. This also goes for sterling and sterling silver flatware. So if you have random pieces, you can go and have that. Now, a gold and silver buyer will give you a percentage off of, and there's a name they use it, I can't remember. I'm trying to think of the name. It's a percentage off that number.
Okay.
It's called spot. So a gold and silver dealer will give you a percentage off of the spot price. So let's say the spot price is $1,000 an ounce. And they say they pay 8% below spot, 10% below spot.
Okay.
And it's up to you to look at the spot price for the day to see where it's at. Those folks wouldn't be in business if they weren't paying good prices.
Can you name one or two places that you would go to do this?
Yes, there's Gold and Silver on Piedmont Avenue.
Okay.
And there's another one in San Francisco, and I can't remember their name. I just went to them. Sorry, hold on. Let me look it up really quick.
And you know what? You could send it to me and I can add it to the show notes too if you can't.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. Gold and silver Piedmont. Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to bring some of my old gold jewelry there.
Yes. Or if you want the cash, yes. Or if you have a jeweler that you like, you can go and pick out something and have something made. Ask for their catalog. They'll have a catalog.
Will the jeweler do the meltdown? So if you go to a jeweler, do you just go there? They'll give you the meltdown price and then you have to make something new?
If it's the jeweler that makes jewelry. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation for a couple good jewelers?
Yes. Ben, there's a Ben guy in San Francisco. I think he's good. Okay.
And again, same thing. We can share after this and I'll post to the show notes.
Great.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, listeners, be sure and read the show notes because there are going to be some hot tips in there. All right, great. Meg, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I learned a lot, and I know my listeners did too. And I hope to run into you sometime. We live in the same city.
I know. Let's hope it's not another 15 years.
Yeah,
Before we see each other again.
exactly. Okay, have a good rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.